I did such a great job of making those impressions that they've all decided that they absolutely positively want to have nothing to do with the laundry business. And I say that tongue in cheek because there's a lot of good things about this business. That's not what I'm trying to say, but they got to see enough of
Yeah.
being exposed to an entrepreneur and some of the trials and tribulations. Because let's be clear, this
Mhm.
is not a cakewalk. A laundromat is a business. I think a lot of people tend to confuse laundromats with some kind of other investment like multifamily housing or whatever. And it's
Right.
not like that. These are, I like to joke, they're like living, breathing organisms.
Welcome to the Planet Laundry Podcast, brought to you by Planet Laundry, the magazine of the Coin Laundry Association. This episode is sponsored by Sense. Sense is the leading all-in-one business management system designed for laundromat operators. Their platform enhances operations, provides valuable insights, and drives business growth with a comprehensive suite of tools, including advanced point-of-sale systems, on-machine payment solutions, online order tracking for pickup and delivery, robust reporting, marketing tools, and seamless payment processing. The most successful laundromats trust Sense to streamline their operations. To learn more about their wide range of solutions to help you succeed, visit trysense.com/solutions and enjoy the podcast. This is the Planet Laundry Podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Planet Laundry Magazine, Bob Nieman. Today I'm with Rob Maes, the owner of Express Laundry Centers, which is a 4-store chain in the Houston area. Rob's originally from the Midwest before relocating to Texas. And in 2006, after more than 20 years in corporate America, Rob decided to start his own business. And he decided on laundromats, the vended laundry business. And I believe this was after attending a CLA seminar, wasn't it, Rob?
Yeah. Hey, Bob. Good morning.
Good
Yeah,
morning.
that's right. I actually joined the CLA through the front door rather than buy a laundry first. I originally joined as an
Yeah.
investor, somebody looking to get into the business. And I went to a new investor conference. I think it was in Orlando, Florida. And at the time, there was a package where if you went to the conference and joined the association at the same time, you got a discount. And I basically joined it on a whim. I had no idea if I was going to get into the business or what I was going to do, but I thought, what the heck, if I'm going to be serious about getting in the laundry business, joining an association would probably be a good thing, and I'd be able to learn more. And at that time, that's what I was trying to do as an investor. So that's how I ended up joining. And I've
Right,
been a
right.
member ever since. So I don't know
Right,
how
and
many
here we
years is
are,
this?
20 years later, and almost 20 years later, and 4 stores later. Rob also serves on the CLA Board of Directors, and in January he will be assuming the chairmanship of that board. So again, yes, Rob, hello again, and thank you for taking time for the
Well,
podcast. 'Cause I know you're a busy
technically,
guy.
I'm not assuming. I actually was elected, believe it or not. I had to be elected to become the chairman. So
Right.
there's no dictatorships or coups or anything like that. I actually will be chair via election.
Okay, fair enough. Absolutely. Point taken. Well, first things first. Congratulations on that. On the upcoming term as chair, which is going to be a 2-year term, which is a relatively new thing for the association. That just started 2 years ago, and I would think that would give you a little more runway to accomplish the things you want to
Yeah,
accomplish.
so that actually, there was a committee, we'll talk about committees in a minute with what the board, some of the things that the board does, but the committee felt that, the traditional model was you had a new chairman every year. And the feeling was is that by having 2-year terms instead of 1-year term, there would be a little more continuity by having a greater time period of 2 years to be able to achieve certain goals. So that was also part of it. So in the
Mhm.
past, you had to squeeze a lot into 1 year to get something done. And by having a 2-year term, you could theoretically have 1-year goals and 2-year goals. So have some longer term and some shorter term. So that's something that the executive committee, I think they actually created a task force to do that. And I'm the second person, actually, Chairman Holland, who I'm
Mhm.
immediate past chair Holland did that. And I'll be the second person to do this
Mhm.
now.
Perfect, perfect. Well, before we get more into your chairmanship and some of your goals and visions for that, can you bring us up to speed on your professional background a little bit? How and when you got into the laundry business?
Well,
Why
I
why
don't
that
know how
excited you?
professional it was, but I actually started out in corporate America. I graduated from college and got a corporate job. And even though I grew up with a family of entrepreneurs, I thought if I was going to get a college degree, I might try to put it to work. And so I started out with a corporate route, and I did mostly sales, marketing, and towards the end, a little bit of purchasing. I did that for about 20 years. And it became apparent after 20 years that the amount of opportunity left relative to the amount of work that I was investing in my career, just it wasn't a good trade-off anymore. And I thought, if I'm going to work this hard, I might as well go into business for myself. And I had actually grown up being exposed to my dad who did this, so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. And so I made a career change. 20 years into it, I was probably, I don't know, in my early 40s, and I decided to look at different businesses. And as we mentioned, there was a new investor conference. And one of them, there were many that I looked at, but one of them was laundromats. And after I went to the conference and was exposed to it, I thought this could be a good opportunity. But what finally convinced me to do it is I went out in my market. This would have been in 2006, 2007, and looked at some of the other laundries that were in our market. And I thought, you know, there seemed to be an opportunity that I could maybe do better. And so that's why I decided to do that first. But quite frankly, I wanted to I always try to read and learn, and I wanted to try to some extent to emulate what Warren Buffett was doing. I realize I'm not Warren Buffett, and I'm not the Oracle of Omaha, but his business model quickly was he wanted to invest in businesses that threw off a lot of cash, and then he would take that cash and invest it in other businesses. And for him, he hit a home run by investing in the insurance business, because they would tend to throw. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that with laundromats. If I invested in laundromats and got them started and they could throw off enough cash, then I could look at doing other things like invest in multifamily housing or real estate or other things like that. I think what makes me a little bit unique is that two things really. One is when I first looked to get into business, the economy wasn't that great. And when I started negotiating with the landlord on the first location, I just simply asked one day, do you have any other locations around town that you would maybe want me to consider? And he said, oh yeah, we have another one in this market over here. And honestly, it was even better than the one I was currently looking at. So all of a sudden I was looking at two locations, and I had no idea how I was going to possibly do that. And I was talking to different banks. This is a true story. I went out and probably talked to 30 different banks trying to figure out how I was going to finance these. Because when you're a startup going off on your own, and it's kind of a challenge. And there was a street in Houston that literally had 40 banks on the street. And I started at one end of the street and drove all the way the other end. You never really know when you talk until you talk to a bank, what their model is. Okay, every bank has a different model. I call it a box. They all have different boxes, and they want to put you in the box. And if you fit in that box, then it works great. So I found two banks that I'd never even heard of, to be honest with you, before, and they were looking to work with startups like with what we were doing. And in fact, one of them was not an SBA lender. I thought for sure I'd have to get an SBA loan because, right, as a new business, I thought that's what you had to do. And they were like, no, we don't do SBA loans. We just lend directly with entrepreneurs. And I thought, oh, okay. Anyway, so there were two banks that we ended up talking with. So I went to the first one and I said, here's my vision. I've got two locations, and I'd like to do one with you and one with this other bank that I'm talking to. And much to my shock, all I did was mention this. They said, well, we want to do both of them with you. And I was blown away by that. So I said, put it in writing. And next thing I know, we're not building not one, but two laundromats at the same time with the same landlord, two different locations. But the other point I wanted to make real quick is if you're going to get in the laundry business, you really should have an end goal in mind. So when we decided to do this, as I mentioned, I was looking for businesses that threw off cash. But the other thing I did that was a little bit different is I like to laugh that I work for my kids. And I mean that in all sincerity. So when we started from day one, we created a trust, which is owned by my three kids. So we donated a little bit of money on behalf of each child with something called a crummy letter. And I'm not giving legal advice here, but anyway, so we did that. And so from day one, the laundromats have been owned inside of this trust. And I did that for really two reasons. When I was out in field sales, for example, with my corporate job, I met a lot of really good entrepreneurs. And two takeaways that I took from these entrepreneurs were, number one, if they were ever in a divorce, it was a lousy situation. Nobody would ever win, especially when a business was involved. It got very messy and expensive, and it just didn't work out well. And the other one was inheritance. So if you had to own a business and you wanted to pass it on to your kids, there could be, tax laws have changed over the years, but there could be a case where when you wanted to give that business to your kids, they could end up paying a lot of taxes. A great example is like farmers. Farmers, when they go to give their farm on to their kids, there can be huge tax implications. Well, I thought by creating the business from day one in a trust in the name of my kids, that there wouldn't be any issue with that. So that's
Mhm.
really the kind
Mhm.
of the genesis for why I decided to create the trust and approach the
Mhm.
business that way. And it's worked out pretty well. And at the end of next year, we'll have paid off our last loan on our 4 laundries.
Yeah.
And literally, what started out as a nominal investment, maybe $10,000 or something like that,
Mhm.
has literally turned into something worth millions of dollars.
Right.
And along the way, it also helped pay for the kids' education. We used the
Mhm.
money from the trust to do that as well, which was a
Mhm.
really good thing, right? So I remember going to college. It was always not always easy to stay focused when you're in college. And what we
Right.
told the kids was, hey, look, this is your money. Okay. It's in the trust. It's your money. You can decide whether you want to spend it wisely or
Mhm.
not. And the other thing we made it clear was that you only got 4 years. So after 4 years of college, the
Right.
trust money ran out. And thankfully, all three of my kids graduated on time. In fact, my daughter graduated with not one, but 2 degrees in less than 4 years. So it all worked out. It all worked out
Yeah.
really well.
It
So
was a
I
little
like to
extra.
laugh that I work for my kids.
It was a little extra incentive for them to get things done on time and to buckle down, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it's great. The intangible benefit of that was so they all knew they were stakeholders in the business since they were
Mhm.
age 10 or 12 or
Mhm.
whatever it was, and so
Mhm.
they've got to see their investment progress over time. And just as a quick side story, my youngest son applied to go into an accelerated program at high school, and they interviewed the candidates. And this, he was only what 15 years old or whatever at the time, and they asked him, what makes you different than some of these other kids applying to be in the program? That's a pretty open-ended question.
Yeah.
And much to my surprise, he comes home at dinner and shares this story with the family. And he says, well, I didn't really know how to answer it, Dad. So I told him that my dad's an entrepreneur. He said,
Yeah.
every day he comes home from work and shares all these stories about all these different happenings that happen with a business, which I happen to be an investor in. And I really learned a lot by being exposed to that. And I guess it made a pretty good impression on the panel because they're used to talking to kids whose parents were lawyers and doctors and
Yeah.
scientists and whatever. It was an
Mhm.
accelerated science program that he was trying to get into. And I thought that was pretty cool that
Yeah.
obviously I had made, I don't know, it was a good impression or a bad impression, but at least I had made some kind of impression on my kids.
Right. 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 And how are they with the laundry business? Are any of them stepping into
Yeah,
that?
I did such a great job of making those impressions that they've all decided that they absolutely positively want to have nothing to do with the laundry business. And I say that tongue in cheek because there's a lot of good things about this business. That's not what I'm trying to say, but they got to see enough of
Yeah.
being exposed to an entrepreneur and some of the trials and tribulations. Because let's be clear, this
Mhm.
is not a cakewalk. A laundromat is a business. I think a lot of people tend to confuse laundromats with some kind of other investment like multifamily housing or whatever. And it's
Right.
not like that. These are, I like to joke, they're like living, breathing organisms. Okay. They have a mind of their own. Each one has a personality by virtue of the neighborhood it's in or the employees working for it. And they have lots of wants and needs. Okay. Every laundromat, when the toilet breaks and starts running all day long, when you go back a week later, it's still going to be running all day long unless you go in and fix it and repair
Right.
it and get it taken care of. So at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. And
Mhm.
and so I like to laugh and joke that I don't have 3 kids. I actually have 7. I have my 3 children created by birth, and I have my 4 laundries.
Right.
And so
Right.
I guess they got to see enough of that they decided that they wanted to pursue different careers, and they all have great careers. One's a software engineer, one's a high school math teacher, and the other one's a chemical engineer. So they all have STEM degrees, and they all have lots of career opportunities. So it's all worked out. But in all seriousness, that's one of the reasons why, other reason why I got a laundromat business is I knew that when the time came, I never expected when I created these businesses that the kids would be involved with them later on in life. But when the time came that we wanted to pivot, if you will, and do something else, we knew that we could
Mhm.
sell the laundries as well and move in a
Right.
different direction. And that's one nice thing about the laundromat business is by virtue of their size and the capital required and so on, you actually have a pretty large pool from which to sell your laundries to. And so we
Mhm.
knew that when the time comes, and that day hasn't come yet, my wife asks me this question at least once a week, but when the time comes that we're going to finally sell our laundries,
Yeah.
we should be able to do that.
Right. Right. Well, the industry certainly has served you and your family well for a number of years, and that's some interesting advice as well too. Uh, Given all of that, what got you interested in serving on the CLA board? I mean, you've
Uh,
got so much going on.
I don't know if I
Sounds
got
good.
interested. I got recruited.
Okay.
Brian Grell with Eastern Funding, who happened to be on the board at the time, said, "Hey, Rob, why don't you put your name in the hat and consider running for the board?" But in all seriousness, I had also served at that time. The CLA still had regional affiliates, and I had served on the Texas affiliate as an officer when we would have local regional meetings. So I had had some exposure to what the CLA does, especially at the board level. But the short answer is Brian Grill asked me to do it. But the reason why I decided to go ahead with it is I thought that it was a good way to give back to the industry. Again, if you look back, I was exposed to it through the CLA, through the New Investor Conference, and I would say that a lot of the achievements that we've been able to do in our business have been either by virtue of what I've learned as a member of the CLA or what I've learned from other members in the CLA. And I mean that in all seriousness. I think we were able to take our business to an extra level or two by virtue of all the things the CLA has to offer. And by learning a lot from, I won't mention any specific names, but I can think of one example where we made a significant pivot in our business. And I reached out to a CLA member who happened to be on the board at that time and said, "Hey, what do you think of this idea? I'm thinking about doing it."
Yeah.
And it was a short conversation. I was out walking the dog at 10 o'clock at night, and they said, "Maes, you can do this. You can do this." And after talking to them and sharing the opportunity with them, that little extra bit of confidence helped me make
Hmm.
that step. And that's invaluable. So I was
Hmm.
really grateful for that. So for me, it's really a way of giving back. I mean, we'll talk more about the board in a minute, but everybody that serves on the board is a volunteer. Nobody gets
Hmm.
paid to do it.
Hmm.
We're all doing it not so much out of the goodness of their heart, but because they truly like the industry or love the industry for whatever reason. And it might be to give back or to, whatever. But the point is, they're doing it
Right.
for free and they're doing it because they like it and they want to do it. So, thanks to Mr. Grell, I put my name in the hat, and we'll talk a minute about running to be on the board. But it took a couple of years before I finally was elected to the board, and I've now served for just over 6 years.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and with that said, what is your vision for the next couple of years for your chairmanship? What type of things are you looking to accomplish with the organization, and just what's that overall vision?
So that's a great question, and that's important, right? So the board serves many roles, but one of the ones that they serve, the funner ones, if you will. My kids always
Hmm.
tease me about the word funner. I guess it doesn't exist, but anyway, one of the more fun reasons is you get to focus on strategy. So you, as a board member, you're helping the organization focus on strategic issues. And so if you look at let's just use the time frame since COVID, because a lot of things seem to have happened and precipitated since COVID. If you look at
Yeah.
our own industry and how COVID impacted our industry, and for example, one thing that really hasn't changed is the board and how it functions. So part of my vision for the next 2 years is we really haven't focused a lot inwardly on how the board functions. And so I really want to try to mix that up a little bit. Obviously, there are certain requirements that we have to achieve by virtue of the bylaws that are required for the organization, but how we conduct ourselves during that time period, we have some flexibility. So I really want to focus on uh, engaging the board more. We have 5 new board members coming in
Mhm.
for 2025, which is unique. Normally, we only get 1 or 2, so we have a big crew coming in. And the
Mhm.
other thing is they've all expressed an interest in really wanting to be involved. So part of the challenge is I'm trying to think of ways that we can engage our board members through a lot of volunteering, for example. And so one of those ways, just as a small example, is if you think about it, we'll have 18 board members next year. So
Mhm.
we're going to create a lot of the board work is done through committees. So it's called committee work. And so we're going to
Mhm.
create a committee called the Content Committee, where we're
Mhm.
going to engage a lot of our board members to create content, whether that be videos, articles for Planet Laundry, or so on. And this has been expressed time and again that a lot of our board members who've been in the industry, presumably one of the reasons why they're on the board is because they've been able to achieve certain things in the industry. And so we're going to engage them and be
Mhm.
able to try to share that with our members out there. So that and then the other part is the fun part, which is to focus on strategy. So I'm thinking that we're going to have what we're going to call an ad hoc committee. And this is a committee where we're going to try to bring together something that we haven't maybe done as much in the past, where we bring past board members, past chairmen together and focus on certain industry topics, strategic issues that maybe have come up that we just haven't had a chance to look at. And it'll be great to get that perspective from a lot of past leaders in the industry and past chairmen, for example. So there's just two examples of where we're going to, so really we're going to try to focus on making it more fun, engaging the board members more, and maybe focusing a little bit more on bigger picture strategic issues, which we just haven't had the opportunity to focus on in the past.
Yeah, and as you say, there's a lot of knowledge in those rooms and in those committees, and a lot of varied knowledge too. And I would think probably one of the tougher things would be trying to play to people's strengths, right? You've got people, you've got members from the manufacturing sector, from the distribution sector, laundry owners. So I would
Right.
think, finding niches for folks would
The,
certainly
the
be
challenge is
a fun challenge.
you get all those people with all those perspectives in the same
Yeah.
room, and it's a challenge to keep everybody organized and focused and all the rest of it. And I say that tongue in cheek, but the point is,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of great knowledge there, and we want to try to tap into some of that. I mean, there are
Right.
social influencers out there. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but I mean, one of the changes in the direction of the CLA is we refocused on our mission statement a year ago or 2 years ago, and we're now trying to be the preeminent resource in the business catering to laundry professionals. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what the mission statement says. And so what
Right.
we're trying to do is, social influencers will come and go. But one thing that's been around for 60 years, and we hope for another 60 years, will be the CLA.
Mhm.
So I would argue that where a social influencer will offer one perspective, or maybe some of their guests will have a perspective, but we've got a whole cadre of board members, 18 of them, and past board members that would theoretically have a whole lot more knowledge out there. And we want to be able to tap into that and offer it because we think and it's easy to do, right? It's easy for people in this industry to talk about what they know and live and breathe every day. So it's
Right.
just a natural fit. So we're going to really try to tap into that and offer
Mhm.
more of that content, if you will, to our members.
Yeah, yeah, hone into that. Well, you've kind of shared a little bit of your vision and what people can expect that way. What are some of the challenges that the board faces going forward in 2025 and down the road?
So, so I would say that probably the single biggest change or challenge that the CLA has seen the last few years has been the advent of the social influencers. And I don't and I it's both a challenge and an opportunity. So when social influencers first came out, we didn't really know what kind of impact they would have, and whether they would even stick around or still be around. And quite frankly, the CLA didn't really know how to engage those social influencers. It was all new to us, right? It was a
Mhm.
new territory, and we were trying to figure it out. So this is a great example of the kind of work that the board does. So we decided a year ago that we needed to develop a policy on how to engage social influencers, and so we've done that now. So that's
Mhm.
the first step: is we now have a policy in terms of what we expect and what sort of influencers we can and can't engage, for example, as an organization. And
Can
now
you
the
share some
next,
of that, Rob? Can you share some of that policy
so
and some of
so I
the
won't get it. It's
talking
out there
points?
for any member to see, but a couple of the examples would be that, for example, if we're going to engage a social influencer at some of our events, they need to be a member, for
Mhm.
example, and they need to disclose, for example, who they may have business relationships with in
Mhm.
terms of people that they may do endorsements for and so on. And so the idea here is just to clear the air and have a clear understanding of who they're aligned with and so on, just the same way manufacturers would, for example. I mean, at the end of the day, a social influencer, I would argue, this is just my opinion, not the board's, is a business. Okay. They call it a platform, and it's a business, and they tend to leverage that platform, whether that be through advertising that they may get on social media by virtue of YouTube or whatever, or it might be through sponsorships or so on. So we now have a clear definition of how we want to engage those influencers. And now the next step, I'm hoping the CLA can take, and again, the board can offer some guidance on this, is to actually engage them with some sort of a formal written agreement so that there's a clear understanding. if they come and bring cameras to one of our events, for example, there's a clear understanding of who owns the copyright of that material, for example. So this is all
Mhm.
new stuff for us. It's all new territory.
Right.
And the good news is I'm an optimist, and I think we can engage some of these influencers and it can be mutually beneficial, right? Okay, they have their audience, we have our audience, and there's certainly no reason why the two of us can't come together where it makes practical sense to do that. And I think you'll start to see more of that. And in fact, I even think for our charity organization, Laundry Cares, they may be able to start to engage some of these social influencers as well. So that part of it's really kind of
Mhm.
exciting. So whether you want to call it a challenge or an opportunity, it's all new stuff. So we're trying to, develop a strategy on how to deal with it.
Right, right. Beyond the growth of social media voices and the addition of all that out there, what other challenges does the association face going forward?
So these are more blue sky or bigger picture type things, but I'll throw a couple of opportunities, if you will, where the board might be able to start to develop a strategy. And one of them would be, let's talk about pickup and delivery. Okay, that's another relatively new development. I've actually been doing pickup and delivery for about 15 years, but we have our wash, dry, fold conference now, and it was very well attended. I think we had over 300 people, members, and so on that came to it. But there's
Yeah.
still some real challenges in pickup and delivery, and one of the primary ones is awareness. So for those that know pickup and delivery exists, it's a great opportunity. But if you look at the amount of market out there that's currently being served by pickup and delivery, it's quite small. So part of the question is there a role for the CLA? And this is a big if. We don't have a particular opinion, but we want to explore it. Is there a role for the CLA to help create more awareness that this type of service even exists out there?
Mm.
So if you
Right.
look at the pickup and delivery model now, for example, there's really, I'm oversimplifying, but the primary way that most pickup and delivery customers are being captured today is through advertising, whereby somebody who's currently looking for the service gets captured, and that might be Google AdWords and so on. Well, that's great for those that may know about the market, but what about the other 95% of the market that still exists out there that isn't even aware of pickup and delivery? Is
Right.
there a role that the CLA, for example, could play to help create more awareness
Right.
for that? And that could be a win-win for everybody, not only those that offer pickup and delivery, but even
Mhm.
laundromats, whereby maybe pickup and delivery services that don't own their own facilities use laundromats and the equipment that already exists there. And again, if you're an optimist and you think that the market is that much bigger, it could be a home run for everybody. So there's just one example of where we can look and see, can the
Mhm.
CLA help uh,
Mhm.
facilitate that? That's just one example.
Right, right, and these growing
Another
market.
one is,
Right.
we
Mhm.
partner with a company called Atmosphere TV,
Mhm.
whereby you can offer video in your laundries if you happen to have TVs. And so another opportunity strategically is there a way that we could serve our members and go the next step, not only offer that free content in our laundromats, but maybe have it targeted specific to laundromat customers, whereby advertisers, for example, may want to partner with the CLA to offer that content into our members that happen to have this service.
Mhm.
Reaching the demographic that we do business with for a lot of these advertisers is a real challenge. And we would
Mhm.
offer a great pipeline to be able to do that. If you've got a TV that's already running, showing the stuff, and you could cut a
Right.
deal with a soap manufacturer, for example, or something like that. And that would be
Mhm.
another way that we could maybe create some real value for our members. So that's one of the missions that I think the board really has. In fact, we have what's called a membership committee, and
Mhm.
we've, for example, come out with a CLA Advantage program recently, whereby we're trying to package more services together to create
Mhm.
values for our members. So that's what we're looking at: is are there kind of these blue sky opportunities? And I think the ad hoc committee, for example, can really kind of boil this down and see which ones we
Mhm.
want to try to pursue a little further.
Yeah, yeah, looking for maybe some of those cross promotion
Yeah.
bundles that may make sense for certain operators.
And
Yeah,
then the
no,
organization would benefit as
yeah,
well too, because if it
yeah.
could help drive membership, then that allows us to have even more influence in the industry. The more members we have, obviously, the more impact
Mhm.
we can have going forward.
Right. The louder voice you have. Absolutely. Oh, you had mentioned when you first got into the business, you weren't really aware of the CLA board or what it did, or you were again like you're a newbie and you're trying to
Yeah.
figure things
I
out.
remember going to like Clean Show, the first Clean Show I went to, and before some of the education classes early in the morning, they had a board meeting. And it's kind of like,
Right.
what the heck is this? What is the
Yeah.
organization doing?
Yeah.
And so I'll just kind of give the cliff notes real quick on the board. But so the CLA is a nonprofit corporation, and at the end of the day, there has to be a certain amount of accountability. And one of the ways that you create that accountability is with a board of directors. So just
Hmm.
like Disney has Bob Iger as their chairman, they have a board of directors, and Bob Iger, as the chairman, reports to that board of directors. Well, we
Hmm.
have kind of the same thing. So, for example, CEO Wallace has to have somebody to be accountable for. And so that's one of the many roles that the board serves. Another
Hmm.
would be, for example, on the budget. So the CLA has to have a budget every year to be able to pay for the staff and all the other things that the CLA does. Well, the board of directors, for example, would review that budget and vote on it and approve it. So those are some of the kind of
Hmm.
procedural things that the
Yeah.
board is responsible for. But then the other one, the fun one, is the one we just talked about a minute ago, which is to focus on the strategic issues. You bring
Hmm.
in these folks that have a vested interest in the success of the industry, and you try to see how we can identify opportunities and give strategy to then be able to share with the CEO so that he can then apply that through the CLA staff and make it happen for all of our members. So that's
Hmm.
in a nutshell kind of what
Hmm.
the board does. And again, what it makes our board unique versus say Disney or any of those is it's all volunteers. So nobody's
Hmm.
being paid to do this. They're all just volunteering their time again because presumably they like the industry and they want to volunteer to help it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good breakdown of kind of the nuts and bolts of the association. Are there any maybe myths or maybe misconceptions that the industry may have about the
Yeah, so
association
I
or its
think
board?
that that's a great question, Bob. And the answer is for example, recently there were a few social influencers were out there advocating that somehow the board uh, does not have membership in mind, that it somehow allied more with manufacturers, for example, and that's just absolutely factually untrue. And let
Hmm.
me share a couple of examples of why that is. So again, if you look at the mission statement, just start with a very basic. It's designed for laundry professionals. We want to be the preeminent resource for laundry professionals, not manufacturers, not distributors, not service providers. It's for the laundry professionals, which is basically a fancy way of saying the owners in the industry. And so the other thing is by virtue of how the board, for example, is put together. So one of our bylaws clearly says that at least half of the board members, so we have 18, at least half of the board members must be store owners.
Hmm.
And that is written right in the bylaws. So there is no way, at least from a board standpoint, that
Hmm.
owners would not be represented. And again, remember, we focus on accountability and
Hmm.
on the strategy with the organization. And that's driven at least 50%. And it's, in some cases, it can be more than 50% by store owners. And then if you just look by virtue of the past chair, current chair, and the incoming chair, they're all store owners. So Chairman
Hmm.
Holland is the immediate past chair. He's a store owner. I'll be stepping in as a store owner for the next 2 years. And
Hmm.
chair-elect is Neil Shapiro in Chicago, who's a store owner as well. So factually, it's just not true. The CLA truly is designed for laundry professionals. And that's one of the reasons I think why the manufacturers step up and support that, because they have a
Hmm.
vested interest in seeing the success of store owners as well, where
Hmm.
theoretically they wouldn't have any equipment to be able to
Hmm.
sell to anybody. So I just wanted to
Hmm.
dispel that myth. Another one is that I think because our committee, which is written in the bylaws, is called the nominating committee, I think maybe some CLA members feel that they have to be nominated to be on the board. And
Hmm.
that's absolutely not true.
Hmm.
Okay. I wish we could change the committee name, but it's in the bylaws. So we're not going to be able to do that. But really, anyone who is a current member and has paid their dues and is an upstanding member can apply to serve to be on the board. And I would encourage anybody watching, if they were thinking or even considering it, saying, well, how come I haven't been called to serve on the board or whatever? It just doesn't work that way. Now, in my
Yeah.
case, I was asked But that's beside the point. The point is
Mhm.
anybody can apply if they want to serve to be on the board. And in fact, I would argue some of the best board members that we have just stepped up and said, this is something that I'd really like to do. And
Mhm.
they've done a great job in helping to
Right.
support. So I just wanted to
All right.
dispel a couple of those myths that might be out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit.
So
And yeah, the
everybody,
laundry
and
owners
then the
out there.
last one is
Yeah.
that I mentioned before, I forgot about this. I think some people feel if they run to be on the board, that if they're not elected the first time, that they're not qualified or shouldn't be considered and may not want to apply again. And there's a we like to say for those that apply that applying to be on the board is a process. And let me just take 1 minute to explain that. It's a
Mhm.
process because, as you heard me share a minute ago, there has to be a requisite on the certain number of owners, manufacturers, distributors, and service providers that serve on the board. So we never know exactly how many of those positions by each type are going to open up. So let's say that we get 10 store owners that apply and we only have
Mhm.
2 openings.
Yeah.
Naturally, not everybody is going to be able to serve the first time they apply. Well, the other
Right.
thing that complicates it a little bit is we have term limits and how long we can serve on the board. And you have to be up just like Congress, the House of Representatives is up for election every 2 years. So are the sitting board members.
Mhm.
So we may have 6 people serving on the board that wish to be reelected, and they may not all be reelected for whatever reason. But until we have that election, we don't know exactly how many openings we have. And I think somehow people, we've had a few people over the years that have applied to be on the board that say, well, you get me, you get one shot. And if I don't make the board, I'm not going to do it again. And
Mhm.
I would just argue that it's more of a process because of what we just talked about. And
Right.
if you really want to serve on the board, you may have to apply over a couple of years' time before you'll get an opportunity to make the board. And that's just because of the requisites that we have in terms of being able to fill those positions.
Right. Just the dynamics of it. Don't get discouraged
No,
if you don't
in
make it on the
fact,
first try.
the great thing is, let's say that you decide, let's say that you don't really know a whole lot of people on the board and you apply to want to be on the board. It may take a little while for some of the board members to get to know you. So it might take a
Mhm.
year. So when you're at a conference or
Mhm.
whatever, that's a great opportunity if you're thinking about serving on the board to get to reach out to some of the other board members so that
Yeah.
they can get to learn a little bit more about you. I mean, we go through a very extensive interview process and so on. But at the
Right.
end of the day, if you have that extra time, why not take advantage of it and try to get to know a few more of the board members and then try again. So we
Right.
really try
Right.
to
No, that's great.
encourage anybody that doesn't get elected,
Mhm.
if they're genuinely interested in serving on the board, to keep putting their name in the hat because you never know. I mean, sometimes like this time we have 5 new members come on the board. That's kind of unique for
Mhm.
2025. Normally we might only have 1 or 2 or 3. So
Right.
that sometimes the number of members on the board changes as well, and that could affect how many were able to get on the board.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's good advice for anyone considering or
Yeah,
interested
I
in
mean,
doing that.
if you
Yeah.
really want to,
Mhm.
make an impact and help and volunteer and give back to the industry, it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. Hey, we've talked a little bit about, or actually quite a bit about social media and the influencers and what's going on. And I'd like to just kind of get back to that a little bit as far as if there's any insight you can offer laundry owners as far as how to navigate that whole world of
So
social media.
I am what you call a lurker. A lurker, I
Okay.
don't know if it's official or not, but I call myself that. And that's somebody that's on all the various forums and social media
Mhm.
pages a lot. And I love to read and see what sort of questions people are asking and what sort of responses that they're getting. And
Mhm.
typically I only weigh in if I feel a particular viewpoint or point, hasn't really been shared, or maybe the
Yeah.
answers are biased for whatever reason, and I'll jump in, weigh in,
Right.
and say, well, that some people look at it this way or pursue it that way, and I would just say that this is just my opinion. This is not the board's opinion. I want to be clear about that.
Mhm.
That a lot of what you see on social media is what I call show and tell. And this is a case where somebody will say, hey, have you ever considered doing this or doing that? And you'll get a lot of good people, laundry owners, that'll weigh in and say, oh, yeah, I do it this way. Okay, it's kind
Mhm.
of that show and tell. This is how I do it. So
Right.
the challenge is on these types of boards is you don't always know the context of their answer. So somebody might say, well, I would never, never do that. Well, it turns out they have a unattended laundry. Well, yeah, okay. If they have an unattended laundry, it might make perfect sense why they would choose to run their business that way versus somebody that has an attended laundry, or maybe they're a multi-store owner, or it could even be the geography of the country. So for example, I think somebody in California posted once, well, I would never put 20-pound washers in my laundromat. And I thought, so one of the things that I always try to do is I would try to put my head in their head and think, wow, why would they say that? Why? Help me understand. Because we have 20-pound washers in our laundries, for example, and they're great. We love them. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand why somebody wouldn't want them. And it turns out that it was a 1,500 square foot store. Okay, I get it. So the trend in the industry right now is to put bigger machines in, customers like that. Well, if you have a limited footprint upon which to work with, yeah, okay, I kind of get it. Maybe you wouldn't want to put those 20-pounders in your smaller store because you only have so much real estate to work with. Well, that's
Right.
the missing piece that tends to not come through in the dialogue in a lot of these communications. Is the owner will share their perspective, but you don't always know where they're coming from. And
Yeah.
so, my advice would be when you read, and the other thing is it's free advice. Okay, so anything in free means different things to different people in this world,
Right.
and sometimes the free advice is fabulous. Okay, I've read some stuff that just kind of blows my mind when I read. It's like, oh wow, what a great thought. It
Hmm.
never occurred to me, and it's wonderful to be able to be exposed to that. But sometimes the advice may not be so great, and so
Hmm.
just be careful when you listen to and interpret that advice. uh I remember there was a person that reached out to me. They wanted to buy a couple of coin drops because one of their washers wasn't working well, and I happen to
Yeah.
have a few of them. And I said, hey, look, I'm not in the business of selling coin drops, but if I can
Hmm.
help you with a couple of them, I'd be glad to do that. Well, as I got to talk and know this person, they were brand new to the business, and it turns out that all they had to do was clean their coin drops. There's an easy way to do that. People put quarters in their coin drop and have a little bit of soap on their hand, and those quarters, that soap will tend to accumulate in the coin drops, for example. And a lot
Yep.
of times, all you need is a Q-tip and some water to clean it out. So I shared that with this particular person, and they ended up having to not buy the coin drops from me. But the reason why I'm sharing the story is, lo and
Yeah.
behold, I'm on the social forums just a month or two later, and this
Yeah.
particular person is dispensing all kinds of advice on these forums. And this is somebody that's been in the business for maybe 1 or 2 months. And so
Right.
that's the other part of the link that may not be there, is that free advice.
Hmm.
You don't know how long they've been in the business and how much knowledge they really have. And of course, their perspective is valid too, but you don't always get to see that when the information comes out. You don't really know their
Right.
background, or how long
The
they've been in
context. Yeah.
the context. So that's the big
Yeah.
thing is,
Hmm.
and don't be afraid to follow up. So try to put it into context, try to understand where this person's coming from that's sharing whatever the opinion is that they're sharing. And then also, don't be afraid to have follow-up questions. Burrow in a little bit further. Well, in the comments section, well, what do you mean by this? Why, help me understand. Why do you not like 20-pound washers? Well, there's a lot of people out there that don't, like I said, because they feel they can make more money from the larger washers. Or if you look at it from an opportunity cost standpoint, right? If you only have so much real estate in your laundry, if you could put in one big washer versus two little ones, and it could bring, in theory, more profit to you, then that would make perfectly good sense. But that may
Hmm.
not always come across in the
Hmm.
in the forums. That
Yeah.
that
Great advice, Rob. Um, hey, how do you think you'll differ from recent past chairs? What makes you unique to this job?
Gosh, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that question. So when I applied to be on the board, I think, I'm trying to remember what I shared in terms of perspective, but it would just be probably maybe the fact that I have some corporate background and that I worked in the corporate world for 20 years. So I do
Mhm.
have some governance background in terms of
Right.
working with corporations and so on. And then, of course, the other is, on the flip side, I've been an entrepreneur as well. And as I said, I did serve on the Texas affiliate for a while before we eliminated the affiliate. So I had a little bit of background in that regard. But I guess as a person, I tend to be a very inquisitive person, and I'm always trying to learn. And so I try to even like when we go to run when the board functions for the next 2 years, I'm going to try to
Mhm.
shake things up and try to do things a little bit differently. And I would
Mhm.
say that most of the other board members knew that about me before I ran to get on the board. They knew that I'm a bit of a
Mhm.
maverick and I like to try different things. And I think in the end, it'll hopefully produce some good results.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You had mentioned earlier about increasing awareness of the association and some of the things it does as one of your visions for your chairmanship. Specifically regarding membership, how do you, I guess, how do you what are your plans for increasing awareness as far as to owners who may not see the value in membership?
So that's a great question, right? So I remember I joined a chamber of commerce years ago for my laundromat, and I remember talking to the chamber person saying, "Well, why should I pay all this money to be a member of the chamber?" And they didn't really have a straight, easy answer. It was kind of like, "Well, most of our chamber members either elect to be on the chamber or they don't." So let me frame it this way, if I could. Let's just use COVID as an example. So when COVID came out, this was truly out of nowhere. Okay, sure, the Spanish flu happened 100 years ago or whatever, but we really had it as a world, not just as a country, but as a world,
Right.
hadn't faced a pandemic in a long time. And when it first came out, it was weird. I mean, it was bizarre. You got different. It's kind of like when 9/11 happened. For those that were around, some of the news that first came out after 9/11 happened, the president was literally flying to different parts of the country, and
Mhm.
the news reports were talking about hundreds of thousands of people being killed. And it was like War of the Worlds, if you're familiar with the Orson
Yeah.
Welles. It was kind of like, what on earth just happened? Well, I would argue to some extent that COVID is another example of that. So, for example, our fourth laundry had only been open about 5 months. It was not cash flowing yet at the time. And here comes COVID. It's like, oh my gosh, are we going to be shut down? Are we not going to be allowed to operate or whatever? And of course, the great news is the CLA was instrumental in being able to help laundromats being deemed essential. And it's kind of funny. I reflect back on this now more. I still talk to friends and neighbors who basically got paid to sit at home and watch TV or YouTube or whatever
Yeah.
for a year while COVID happened. Well, we stayed open. We were out working. Things really didn't change that much. But the
Mhm.
reason why I share this story is there's a great example where, by virtue of having that membership and having paid into the CLA, for example, and having something come completely out of left field, the CLA stepped in and helped make sure that we were deemed essential, which was just a huge boon. Not only did it keep businesses from potentially, capitulating by virtue of it's not even cash flowing yet, but in some cases, I think businesses were able to actually profit by being open during COVID when a lot of other businesses weren't. So that's just one example where I would say that joining the CLA for our members is kind of like an insurance policy. Okay.
Mhm.
Nobody likes to pay for insurance. It's an expense. I get all that. But the alternative is even worse, right?
Mhm.
If you have a fire or something and you don't have insurance, the alternative is probably not going to be very good. So there's a great example with COVID where the
Mhm.
CLA, in my opinion, provided an
Mhm.
invaluable benefit
Right. Right.
to our members.
Eh,
But then I'm
I mean,
go
mhm,
ahead.
and certainly, legislative advocacy too,
Yes.
on a more
So there
recent,
are
example.
there are a couple other things that make us different than social influencers, for example, and obviously that's one of them. So just in the last year, this issue of microfiber has come up. If you look at like the fleece I'm wearing, there's an issue, and we're talking about fibers the size of a human eyelash. To give you an idea, that's to the level that they want them filtered. But there's legislation that's popped up in different parts of the country to be able to deal with this whole microfiber issue. And for whatever reason, the folks that are advocating for legislation feel that it should be done at the manufacturer level. There's different ways that the problem could theoretically be addressed, including even at the level of the people making the fiber itself. But so far, the CLA, gets these challenges, if you will, that sometimes come out of left field, and has to be able to react to that. And so,
Right.
fortunately, because of the great network that CEO Wallace has in place with different government lobby groups and so on around the country, we were able to respond to that almost immediately and jump in it. Now, it's not going to go away. I don't think microfiber is going to go away. I think it's going to come back at some point. At least this is what we're hearing by reading the tea leaves. But the CLA certainly is in a really good position. And just to finish that thought, the boards, you say, well, gosh, how could the board help with that? Well, remember, we're a board of volunteers. So when microfiber first popped up last year, Chairman Holland was on the plane with CEO Wallace out dealing with legislators and so on, right out in the field addressing it. So that's just another way that the board members can step up to help out. And then the other thing that makes the CLA, the organization, different is the fact that we have the charity arm to our organization, which is called Laundry Cares. And I'm not aware of any other social influencers that offer a charity. Maybe they do. I'm not aware of any. But this is a great way for our industry to give back, not only to the communities that we tend to be located in, but just to give back to society in general. And that can be, the Laundry Cares is multifaceted. And that could be, I mean, years ago, it was with Habitat for Humanity, then it was disaster response, and now more recently, it has more to do with literacy, and I won't get into that too much, but if you haven't really looked at Laundry Cares, I encourage members to look at it because it's a great way to help advocate literacy within your particular market or neighborhood. And what's so cool about that is you're doing, you can also benefit by doing good for your community because it's just another way through something like the Read, Play, Learn centers, which is a table and chairs for kids and books and so on, to differentiate your laundry versus maybe some of the other ones that are in your market. So those are a couple examples.
Yeah, no, those are great.
And then finally, we've got the membership committee, which is now trying to bundle together through our CLA Advantage program, where we're trying to bundle together. We have credit cards and so on, kind of like AAA or some of the other organizations out there. And we do think that there are certain things that we can do that we can bundle together to help defray some of the cost of membership or make it even more valuable. And we're looking at doing that all the time. So that's a great example where the board works with the CLA staff to try to identify other opportunities within our industry where we can maybe create more value for our members.
Yeah, always trying to grow that value. Absolutely.
It's important. I mean,
for you, Rob.
Membership is the lifeblood of our organization. If we don't have members, we don't have anything. Okay. I want to be clear on that. And so we're very sensitive to that. And we really, that's why I would argue if you reached out to any board member, they would always be interested in listening and talking with our members out there and trying to hear what they have to say. And that's another great role that the board plays, right? It's kind of like, the analogy I use is it's kind of like Congress. Okay, you're not elected, but you're elected on the board, but you can be the conduit to communicate with other laundry owners in your market or whatever, perhaps your corner of the industry that you're in, and you can help funnel some of those needs to the rest of the board by being able to do that. As long as you're willing to put an ear out and listen to what the other members. Other concerns that they may have.
Yeah, and growing that awareness. Absolutely. Just a couple more for you, Rob, because I know you're busy.
Sure.
And I appreciate your time.
Well, this is fun. I'm having fun.
Yeah. Well, what are getting industry specific, not so much association specific, but what are some of the I guess opportunities? What are some of the best opportunities for laundry operators today and going forward?
Okay, so let me preface my response by saying that these are my personal opinion. They're not opinions of the board or anything like that. But I tend to be an avid reader or listener, and so one of the things that I've started doing more as an investor is I've been looking at what they call the alternative investment universe, and this would be other than stocks and bonds and financial investments, these would be alternatives. So things like real estate. Other examples like that. And there are certain podcasts out there. One of them that I listen to, for example, is called Mailbox Money. It's hosted by a guy named Bronson Hill. He wrote a book called Fire Yourself. I probably should have fired myself more than once. Anyway, the premise is that he's able to live now just by investing in alternative investments out there. He's able to support himself. He loves to travel and do other things. And so one of the primary alternative investments that a lot of folks have looked at basically since COVID, maybe even before, is real estate, multifamily housing in particular. Well, this was a great home run. Okay, it worked really well for the last few years because interest rates were really low. There was a lot of apartments out there that could be improved and rented out, and then you would increase the rent, and they would cash flow. So cash
Right.
is king, right? Remember how we talked before about one of the reasons why I got in the laundromat business was because they threw off cash. Well, um, that's all changed. The real estate market, for example, has changed, and a lot of the multifamily units out there right now just are not cash flowing at all. And so the only sort of real multifamilies that are being bought right now are ones that are heavily discounted because they're not cash flowing. And so they might sell at a discount of 20 or 30% to the market. But for investors looking, through syndication or something like that to get into multifamily housing, they want cash flow from day one.
Mhm.
So what a lot of these alternative investors are doing now is they're looking at things outside of multifamily. And one of them that they're looking at is car washes. So they're actually, instead of looking at a real estate based investment, they're looking at car washes. And one of the reasons why they are is because car washes throw off some pretty good cash, especially
Mhm.
relative to the alternative to real estate. Well, I would argue, just my opinion, that as the car wash industry goes, so may the laundromat industry. So if you're starting to, so for example, on my Facebook, I'm out there lurking all the time reading. On my Facebook, popped up an opportunity here recently where somebody was syndicating car washes, promising a 10% cash on cash flow as well as a return on investment. And and I think that you could see the same sort of thing start to happen with laundromats. And so the good news for laundry owners is, let's say that a laundromat has a typical net operating income of 25%. Well, relative to real estate that might offer a 7 or 8 or 10% return, I think that more of these syndicators, for example, are going to look just like they are with car washes right now at looking at getting into the laundromat business. So I've just spent 5 minutes to explain all this. So the
Right.
bottom line is, I think laundromat values are going to continue to go up. There
Mhm.
seems to be an insatiable demand right now, particularly since COVID, with a
Mhm.
lot of folks that are investing in alternative investments, and they don't want to own them directly. They want to own them indirectly through syndication, for example, or
Right.
franchising. I'll talk
Right.
about that in a minute as well. And
Mhm.
so if you're able to hang on to your laundry and keep it operating successfully and maintain your profit margins, I would argue, if the industry has been at a typical multiple of 3 or 4 times net operating income, it
Mhm.
could theoretically double. So think about
Mhm.
it. If you're throwing off 20 or 25% gross profit, and there are
Mhm.
investors out there that are excited to have a 10% cash flow, you could
Mhm.
theoretically double the value of your laundry relative to 3 to 5 times
Right.
earning by
Right.
virtue of being able to throw off, if you're throwing off 25% now relative to that, some of the other investments that are only throwing off
Mhm.
10% cash out there. So I
Mhm.
think this could really impact our industry. So I think we're
Mhm.
just talking about blue sky type stuff. So I think
Yeah.
laundromat values could really start to appreciate a
Mhm.
lot in value. And B, because of that, I think you're going to see a lot more syndication where
Mhm.
investors are going to form a syndicate or a business just to buy other laundromats out there. And then the other trend that I saw is recently was announced that somebody is going to open 50 Tide franchise laundromats. This came out
Right.
recently. Well, 50 is a big number. Okay. So there's been a few other franchising models out there, and just my opinion. But one of the challenges with franchising is there's just only so many good locations out there upon which you can build a laundromat. Clearly,
Mhm.
laundries, if they're going to be successful, have to have a good location. If you have a bad location, I don't care how good a marketer and so on you are. If it's a bad location, it's never going to do all that well. Well, if somebody's going to hypothetically go out and build 50 laundromats, I'm going to argue that there's probably not 50 really good locations out there for them to go and put their
Right.
50 franchises. So I would argue that what they're doing is they're trying to leverage their brand. I want to say that twice. They're
Okay.
going to try to leverage their brand. In this case, it's the Tide brand. And what does that mean? That means, let's say they identify a location that looks really good. They're going to go and build their laundromat with the Tide brand right on top of another one that's already there. right?
Yeah.
They're not going to find 50 brand new locations. This is just
Mhm.
my opinion. Okay. I want to be clear on this, and it's got
Right.
nothing tied because I think lots of other people are going to start to do this as well. And
Mhm.
so they're going to have to figure out how to leverage their brand to be able to capture some of that business.
Mm.
Otherwise, why I don't see how they could justify investing in doing that. So
Right.
I'm a kid that grew up I grew up as a kid in the 70s, and I remember when all the fast food franchises came out. So like McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Hardee's. And if you think about it today, chances are they're almost all built right next to each other, right? If you want to go to
Mhm.
McDonald's, chances are Burger King's across the street or right next door. Well, I would argue that that's not a coincidence,
Right.
that they obviously like the location for whatever reason. And now instead of there being just one good business at that location, now there's three or four. So another
Mhm.
big trend that I think you're going to see going forward is branding. I
Mhm.
really think that that's going to become important. So I have, for example, part of my business model is branding. We're part of the Express Laundry national brand. And I
Mhm.
think you're going to see new brands pop up and people really try to leverage those brands because that's going to be one of the ways that you're going to differentiate your business where I think, are going to have more competition in the future. So the good news is laundromat values are going to go up. The bad news, if you will, is I think there's going to be a whole lot more competition out there. But I think the best way to deal with that competition is through branding. And just to finish the thought on branding, branding doesn't have to just be a logo or advertising or whatever. I would argue that how you operate or choose to operate your laundry has as much to do with your brand as anything else. So again, we'll go back to the hamburgers just because that's on my mind right now. Maybe I'm hungry. Maybe it's lunchtime. I don't know. Anyway, like Burger King versus McDonald's. So if you remember when they first came out in the 70s, Burger King was charbroiled. Their burgers were charbroiled. That's how they tried to differentiate their burgers from McDonald's, which were fried on a fryer.
Mhm.
Burger King, if you remember the old slogan, was have it your way. So
Mhm.
Burger King would allow you to customize what was on your burger. If you didn't want onions on your burger, you could tell them when you place the order. Well, McDonald's, if you wanted a cheeseburger, it came with onions. That was the way they did it. And then I think Wendy's, it was fresh is best. So Wendy's big pitch was their burgers weren't frozen, theirs were fresh. And then remember, then it changed and it became, where's the beef? Remember the
Yeah.
old lady that
Yeah.
screamed, where's the beef? And
Yeah.
so they were trying to promote the fact that their burgers were bigger. And then after that, I remember Wendy's burgers became juicy. Remember that was the thing, the burgers were
Yeah.
juicier. So the point is how you choose to run your business can differentiate the brand as much as whatever name you call it or how you do it. So if you're a single store owner, I would argue that to be competitive in the long term, and we're not talking about a year or two, we're talking about longer term, that you're going to have to either develop a brand if you don't have one now,
Mhm.
or leverage that brand. And I would suggest that the way to do that would be with multi-store operations. And the reason for that is if you only have one store and a big competitor comes in and moves into that market, you could be in trouble. But if you have multiple stores, in theory, you can defray that risk to some
Mhm.
extent over your multiple locations, and you'll be able to leverage your brand more. So if you have more locations, in
Right.
theory, you'll be able to leverage the brand more. So I like to use the pie analogy. I think one of the articles I wrote for Planet Laundry years ago was slice of the pie or pizza economics, something like that. The
Yeah.
point being, if you have, say, four locations, in theory, your radius for those four locations is many, many miles. Okay.
Mhm.
10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles. But if you have only one location where you're used to working with a 1 mile radius, your pie is quite small. So if
Mhm.
one new competitor or big competitor comes into your 1 mile pie, you
Mhm.
are more vulnerable and more at risk, I would argue, than somebody that has four laundries with a 20 mile pie around it, for example. So I think this could be a real trend that we need to all watch going forward.
Perfect. Great. Those are some great trends, Rob. Last one for you. Uh,
Sure.
what does the future hold for the laundromat business, and why do you think that?
So we just talked, I think a lot about that. I think the
Mhm.
future is bright, especially if you can continue to create value and differentiate yourself through branding. I think in terms of the valuation of the laundries, they could be even better So in that regard, it could be much brighter. I think we talked a little bit about pickup and delivery. I think the potential for that part of the market is still huge. Even commercial work, which is predominantly what we focused on the last 15 years, I think there's great opportunity for laundromats to position themselves relative to other commercial offerings out there. So in general, I think the future for the laundromat industry is still very, very bright. And I would argue even, let's say a couple of major competitors, if we look at the car wash industry, I mentioned that before, I think the car wash industry is a great precursor of what may happen to the laundromat industry. For example, in car washes now, for example, there's a national chain which has popped up called Mr. Car Wash, Mister, and we've had several built around us. Just by virtue of having a couple of big players in the market, I think will create even more awareness for our industry and draw more attention to it. So I do think, years ago, I think Jeff Gardner made the comment that when Tide decided to get into the dry cleaning business and so on, that it really brought a spotlight to our industry that maybe it didn't have before in the past. And I think that's really positive because, as we just talked about in the case of pickup and delivery, for example, I won't say unlimited potential, but there's still a huge amount of potential out there. And for those that are thinking about, just a word for the wise, for those that are thinking about getting into the commercial business, I would argue that the way that, at the end of the day, you may be competing with laundries that are multiple millions of pounds, big plants that can process a whole lot of volume. And the way that you can differentiate yourself in the commercial business is by offering to wash items that people want to choose to own instead of rent. Because there's really no way for these big mega factory laundries to be able to differentiate your items from all the other ones that they're throwing in these big giant tunnel washers and so on. So if you can identify markets where people, for whatever reason, prefer to have their own laundry that they want to keep versus renting from somebody else, that's where there's a good niche or opportunity for you to get into the commercial space.
Yeah. No, great stuff, Rob. That was everything I had. Is there anything I didn't ask about the association, the board, the industry that you'd like to get out there? Anything I
No,
didn't ask?
I think that's pretty much it. I would just, I'm a little biased because I serve on the board, but if anybody's either on the fence thinking about joining the CLA or thinking about joining the board, I would strongly encourage you to look at it. I think the CLA offers tremendous value. Just using COVID as one example, it's like the CLA is like having that friend that you never know when you're going to need them. Okay. It's there in the background, working hard, the staff, everybody's doing all those things. And you may, through personal circumstance, business circumstance, or something as crazy as a pandemic, the great news is the CLA is working hard in the background there to help you. And it's hard to put a value on that. But at the end of the day, I would argue that most laundry owners could afford to pay the few $100s that it costs to become a member. And at the same time, you get that intangible benefit, right? Where you get to be exposed either via the education seminars or conferences or learning materials that we offer, but you also get an opportunity to meet a lot of other people that share a vested interest in wanting to see the success of the industry. And I would argue that you can learn an awful lot from those folks. And then if you are a member and you're thinking about serving on the board, don't wait to be nominated. Don't wait for that phone call. Don't be discouraged if you don't get elected the first time. It's like anything in life, right? Sometimes you have to wait a little bit for the best things in life. And, you probably don't marry the first person that you meet. So don't be afraid to step up and volunteer and serve on the board. We're always looking for great members. And I promise you, at least during the next 2 years, my goal is to make serving on the board even more fun. And I think we can do that by just letting folks in the industry do what they're already good at, which is talking about the industry and sharing their knowledge and wisdom.
Let's leave it right there, Rob. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. It's always enjoyable chatting.
Yeah, I got to go back. I got to get back to work. So I got a lot to do. So thanks, Bob. If I haven't met any of our members out there, if I happen to be at one of the events, please step up and meet me. I can't go out and meet everybody, but I'd be happy to talk with you and meet with you and get to know you better.
Perfect. Rob, thank you so much. Thanks
you,
for
Bob.
joining us on our
You bet.
podcast today. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to Planet Laundry at planetlaundry.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube.